have this feeling that Harry's next album might not be what people expect from him. Maybe even commercially a flop. And as a fan, that's really exciting. Hear me out. Over the past months, I think we in the fandom have gotten this vibe that HS4 was coming soon in the future, at least maybe within this year. And as a musician and branding girly, that got me thinking about what I think HS4 might be like. Because what happens when an artist objectively has reached the top of pop, played the biggest festivals, won the big prestigious awards, and by all means basically has nothing to prove anymore? That led me to think this. I think Harry could give us an album that a lot of people won't understand or even like. And I think that might be exactly the point. So today I wanted to make more of like a podcasty, chatty video where I go over what I think HS4 might be like from a more conceptual point of view, really touching on this whole notion of art for art's sake versus art for commercial success. I also want to talk about the context of Harry's music career so far, along with what even defines a flop, and also the benefits of a so-called flop. I have some bullet points, but to be honest, I might just like freestyle a lot of it because, you know, my thoughts are not bullet pointed always. If you enjoy this video and if you're interested in music, branding, pop culture, fangirliness, then make sure to subscribe and also let me know your thoughts on this entire topic below. So yeah, let's look at the context of Harry's music career first. If we look at Harry's music career, obviously he started in One Direction, and I think really by the last couple of albums in the band, all the boys in the band got more involved with songwriting, which I think is honestly some of their best songs from the band were the last couple of albums. And I think one of Harry's best contributions to the band that I just have to mention is If I Could Fly. And I think it's just such a beautiful song, just lyrically, melodically, everything. It's the perfect ballad. And I think it really opened the public, but also a lot of fans' eyes to Harry Styles as the talented songwriter, rather than Harry Styles, the hot one from One Direction, or even Harry Styles, the frontman of One Direction, which is such a dumb sentence in and of itself, but either way, after the band, I think we see it with all of the boys. Their first albums weren't necessarily made for the charts. This was their first time to have this creative freedom that they didn't have to the same extent in the band. And the vibe that I get from a lot of the albums, I've said this before, I think there was a lot of songs maybe that they thought about releasing prior, maybe through the band, that they just couldn't release through the band or didn't want to release through the band because they felt either too personal or too special to release through the band, that they wanted this to be on their first solo album. And then on a side note, we also have Harry obviously experimenting more with his like fashion style in a similar way that I think his music would end up evolving. Because yes, some of his outfits were seen as odd. Floral suit, first of all, that got roasted in the media. It was a gorgeous suit, but I think then people came around to it, and even like Harry with the wide leg and the high-waisted pants and like all of that. And now fast forward, people are like, ooh, wide leg pants are everything. And I think that there's a certain sense of him being unafraid to take fashion risks or being a little bit experimental in that sense. And I think he ended up being a little bit of a trendsetter both in music but also in fashion. Like just look at the Adidas Stompers. Anyways, if we go back to Harry's albums, then we have his second album, which Fine Line, obviously. And I think that was when he really tried to experiment, and it was more looking towards the future or being in the present rather than giving past songs a chance to shine, you know? And I think he definitely leaned into the experimental side, but still firmly in the pop realm, obviously. And we see this with Watermelon Sugar and the success of that, and Adore You as well, that really catapulted him into the mainstream. From a fan perspective, Harry was no longer our
little indie solo artist,
but now popular with the mainstream too. But at the same time, we also have things like COVID that made it hard for any artist really to evolve commercially, because there were no concerts, no shows, no big promo opportunities. So his hype was kind of, you know, comparatively, I'd say at a medium level at this point. And then Harry's House comes along, and I think it was really an interesting album to experience because it felt like he was just focused on making what he wanted to. In an interview about the album, he said,
"It's so unbelievably liberating to go, I just want to make good music. That's it. That's what I want to do. and everything else is what it will be.
And I think luckily for him, there was some good timing, but also his personality and the branding and the promotion made it so that Harry's House ended up being a mainstream hit. And I think this album really cemented him as a trendsetter in pop, especially with him performing at Coachella. I think it kind of became hyped in a way that his previous albums didn't. And I think because it was popular to like Harry Styles, more people liked Harry Styles, and suddenly it wasn't cringy to say that you liked Harry Styles, you know? And what I think is really interesting about Harry's House as an album is that it didn't chase the mainstream. It almost feels like the mainstream caught up to the album. I think it points to this idea that yes, maybe Harry's House was a bit odd or a bit out of the mainstream, but I think the mainstream is shifting too. And it just ended up shifting to include it. And we see it over and over again nowadays. For example, Chapel Roan. Her album was not in the mainstream for like the year after she released it, and then suddenly everyone was like,
oh my god, this album.
And then she became a mainstream pop girly. And at the same time, we also see the other side of where an artist will make something that they think the mainstream will like. I'm thinking, oh, Katy Perry's recent album. And then when the album drops, the mainstream goes, nah. And that's so interesting to me. And I think it underlines the fact that the mainstream is fluid and constantly evolving and not just, you know, a set of requirements that you have to meet in order to be accepted. Either way, back to Harry. So, massive world tour, won the Grammy, all of the big awards, played the big festivals like Coachella, and objectively, nothing left to prove. So, what's next? I personally think that Harry's gonna lean even more into this mindset of, I'm gonna make what I want. As long as I like it, I don't care what anyone else thinks. Basically, really just truly art for art's sake. And yes, he did do that with Harry's House to an extent, but I also think that there was a really lucky timing where things lined up in a way where the promotions really just succeeded. That is not always guaranteed. But I do think that HS4 could be even more experimental, even more out there, even more niche, in a way that a lot of the mainstream might just not get it or enjoy it or like it, and thus deem it a flop. But then again, like, the word flop is kind of misleading because it's so vague. Because traditionally, a flop referred to a project that didn't meet the sales expectations. But now, in the modern era of streaming, what even are the sales expectations? Yes, there's the commercial success of getting on the charts and all of that, and we saw that with As It Was or Watermelon Sugar and all of that. And then there's the critical success, like the music critics. And I feel like often the mainstream commercial success is not always what the critics enjoy. I think we saw this with Sign of the Times, that a lot of critics really admired and recognized for being a really, really good song. And yes, it was kind of popular from the mainstream, but it wasn't a trending song, and I don't think it was intended to be a trending song. Regardless of whether it's a pop or a flop, I think that there are benefits to either. And I think considering Harry's success in the music industry and where he is now, then I think a so-called flop album could really be a good thing. And here's why. I really want to underline that when I say flop, I don't mean that the songs or the album is not going to be a good album, because it's probably going to be great, because I bet it's going to be exactly what Harry wanted to release. But also, there's a chance that it's just not made for the mainstream, and therefore the mainstream might call it a flop. And we see this with a lot of artists who intentionally make artsy niche albums, like think Evermore or Folklore by Taylor Swift, or even the Tortured Poets Department. These were very niche albums, right? They were made for art's sake, for the niche, for the story, for the theme. And not a lot of artists get to do just art for art's sake albums, because everything in the music industry is about sales. But I think Harry is in a position where he can do this type of album, where yes, they can get commercial success as well, but that's kind of a bonus because the album was never meant for necessarily the biggest commercial success ever. Hope that made sense. And I think especially if you're an artist that has reached the so-called top of the music industry, they either tend to step away from music. We've seen this with Rihanna, for example. She reached the top of music and then she was like, bye, I'm gonna start a makeup company now. And that's also so fair because you're leaving while it's great. But also a lot of artists, I think, end up being in a position where they can afford to take creative risks, where they're like, I've proven myself, I can do whatever I want now. I'm gonna make something that many people might not find enjoyable. But as long as I find it enjoyable, that's all that matters. And I think Harry could be a point in his career where he's like, yeah, that's how I feel. I'm gonna just make something. And if other people don't enjoy it, then that's okay, because I like it. And I think we already saw it a little bit. For example, music for a sushi restaurant. People roasted that. And like, the music video is not my thing. Like, I appreciate it, but I think it unlocked a squid phobia for me. So ugh, slimy tentacles are not my thing, but I think that was intentional. I think that was like provocative in itself. Either way, like sonically, musically, music for a sushi restaurant was not typical pop, you know? People roasted it. People were like,
this sounds like that Disney Channel theme song. This sounds like a song for advertisements, blah, 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 blah.
Then once people really like started getting used to it, they really started to appreciate it. On another note, I think Harry has always been really good at balancing vulnerability with also privacy in his lyrics and in his songs. And I think the themes in his next album could very much be very similar to what he's already written about, but just even more thought out and considered. Because similarly, I think he's gonna be more brave in that sense and be like, I've proven myself. I can say what I want, what I mean, what I really think. In the same vein, I think promotionally, yes, there are gonna be promotional efforts, of course, like most albums do, but I think they're gonna be very much more low-key or subdued and focus on the existing fans rather than attracting new fans. And this more low-key promotional efforts, I think, has the potential to just not attract the mainstream. And so the mainstream might call the album a flop, but at the same time, I think it also means that it would be a cult favorite in the fandom. We as fans, yes, while we want to see our favorite artist achieve massive success commercially, it also makes it feel a little less like our little thing. So for example, yes, we loved As It Was when it came out. We were like,
oh my god, this song is amazing. Love the music video, love all of it.
And then once it hit radio and the mainstream and everyone was like, oh my god, this song is trending, it's so good. All of us, I feel like, we're like, okay, but what about the other songs? I think we like the other songs more because this feels a little overhyped, over trendified. At least that's how I felt. I was like, let me just go listen to Satellite and listen to Love of My Life and Boyfriends and all of that. And suddenly there were people who never gave a shit about Harry Styles, but because As It Was trending and he was performing at Coachella, suddenly it was trendy to like Harry Styles, as I said before. And suddenly everyone was like, oh my god, we're Harry Styles' biggest fans. And all the other fans that have been here for a while, they were like, welcome, but are you sure? Like, are you sure it's not just performative? And hey, I'm not here to like judge anyone's level of fan or fan entitlement. I have an entire video on that, but it just felt a little less like our little artist. You know what I mean? Hope that makes sense. And I think in general, a lot of the underrated songs are cult favorites in fandoms for a reason. Namely because they didn't get overhyped by the mainstream, so they still feel like our little special songs that we know about and we're let in on this like little secret almost. And I think in a way the commercial flop and the cult favorite are two sides of the same coin. And I think it ties really well into the concept of parasocial relationships, this one-sided bond we have with an artist. Like, we feel like we know them, but we don't really know them, but we feel like we do. Because when an artist gets commercially more successful and the fandom gets bigger, this intimacy fades a little bit. And sometimes a flop album can bring it back. Not because the album is actually bad, but because it feels like it's just for us again. Something that we can dig into, something we can really analyze and sit with, and also weirdly like defend to people who don't get it or don't like it. And I feel like weirdly that's when the parasocial relationship feels the strongest. When it's not about popularity, but about the resonance that the album achieves. So I think if Harry does give us an album that's more experimental, more personal, and less for the mainstream, then I actually think it can be a really great way for Harry to strengthen the bond between him and the fandom. And as fans, I think we're here to enjoy and support the art. And there's a certain level of trust from the fandom where we trust the artist enough to let them evolve, let them grow, regardless of commercial success. Because we're not owed our idea of a perfect Harry Styles album. We're just lucky to get to grow with him through the albums. But hey, HS4 could totally also go on to be the biggest commercial success ever, even bigger than Harry's House. Because the mainstream is unpredictable. And as I've said in this video, there are pros and cons to both. And us fans will probably love it regardless. Because at the end of the day, we'll be there the second the song drops, streaming the song, analyzing the lyrics, and appreciating the art of it all. So if HS4 flops in the charts, but hits in our hearts? Damn it, that was poetic. Even when I wrote it, I knew. Either way, that might be the kind of success that matters most. And I think that that's really special. And with that, thank you so much for making it to the end of the video. If you have any thoughts, any comments, any theories on what you think Harry's next album could be like, let me know down in the comments. I'm really curious to hear what you guys have to say. And if you have any video ideas or topics that you'd like me to cover in the future, please let me know. And if you like this video, make sure to subscribe as well. I'm trying to reach 2,000 subscribers. And with that, have a nice day, have a nice week, and I'll see you again in my next video. Bye!